This is producer Joey Stuckey, and with me is a dear friend, Bill McCann from Dancing Dots. And Bill has been an accessibility pioneer since I got in the business and really before. Bill, thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
My pleasure, Joey. My pleasure to talk to you again. We've been through a couple campaigns. Last time I saw you, we were hanging out in London, England, I think it was.
Absolutely.
And you had just performed, and it was a party. Yeah.
Well, that's whenever we're together, it's definitely a party.
Yeah, amen.
Well, I want to take us back. My earliest memories of you is when I was trying to get into computer recording. Now, I have always been an analog recording enthusiast. There's good things about analog recording. There's bad things, just like anything in life. And I was drugged kicking and screaming into the computer age back in 2002. It was a real challenge then. And still there's some challenges now to use computer recording software. We call them DAWs, digital audio workstations. And you had pioneered this wonderful cake talking that gave us access to what was a preeminent DAW at the time, which was Sonar.
Exactly.
And I want you to know that I stayed with Sonar 8.5 point something for as long as I possibly could. I finally had to change and move out of it around 2020. So I stayed as long as I could.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But anyway, what I want to do, that's just what you've meant to me personally is making computer recording technology accessible for the blind or visually impaired. But before we get into all the amazing things you've done in that regard, tell me a little bit about your early beginnings and why you got involved in music technology.
Oh, okay. Well, I got involved in music when I was about 5 years old, and my cousin came over with a trumpet, and my older cousin played the trumpet. He was pretty good, and I was like, I want to make that noise. So that brought me into music. By the time I was 9, my parents finally believed me and finally had a few bucks to buy me a trumpet. And so I started playing trumpet, and I quickly learned that my mom found me a teacher, and I learned to read music in Braille. But I quickly found out that trying to get the material that you want to read in Braille is not so easy. And
Right.
So I, literally would take print scores and walk to the corner mailbox and send them to a wonderful volunteer. And at some point later, maybe a week or two or over a month, I would get my Braille score back. And since these folks were volunteering their time and their expertise, I couldn't be demanding and say, well, actually, I need this tomorrow, guys. So
Yeah.
that kind of brought me into, let's say, the problem side of the equation. Like, wow, this is a problem. And the problem only got worse as I got into high school, joined my high school band and orchestra, and started taking leadership position in the trumpet sections and playing more solos. And then I went to music school. I went to a conservatory. And then, of course, it wasn't just my trumpet parts for the jazz band and the wind ensemble. It was, okay, this week we're going to analyze a Mozart symphony. And, my classmates would go to the library and check out the recording and the score. I'd be getting the record if I was lucky and be like, okay, yeah, it's in D major, but I couldn't read along and, okay, what are the oboes doing at bar 75? So anyway, it just got worse. And then I did get through college and I graduated, and long story short, got into the computer field by way of, thinking that, well, maybe I could make a difference using computers. Maybe there's a way to get print music into an accessible format. For me, that's Braille music. Because there aren't enough wonderful people who can sit down and look at a print score and manually crank out a Braille score, because in their head, they have all the rules of Braille music transcription. So fast forwarding about 12 years after I graduated, and after I had worked in the computer industry doing business programming for an oil company, and having stayed active as a musician, teaching students sighted and blind to play trumpet, and recording and doing whatever I could, playing in every church and nightclub that would have me. I finally reached a point in my professional career at the oil company where they were saying, if you volunteer to leave, because we need to get smaller, we'll give you a lot of training and some money. And so after a lot of discussion and prayer and agonizing and sleepless nights, my wife and I decided, maybe we can do this. So I took the deal, and I basically was a business. Well, I was the graduation project for a couple smart kids from the University of Penn at the Wharton School. They helped me write my first business plan. They helped me find a little bit of money from a state program for startups and high-tech startups. And that's what became Dancing Dots. And that's where I was able to write a little simple prototype that took actually at that time it was a MIDI file for all you MIDI fans out there. And I was able to take a MIDI file and convert it to Braille music. And with that little prototype, I was able to get some federal funding from the U.S. Department of Education, which enabled me to hire my business partner and friend, Albert Milani, who took my little prototype and made it into a program called Goodfeel. And Goodfeel is now at version 4.2. It's in use in last count 52 countries. And it takes a digital print score and converts it to Louis Braille's system for music. And it not only shows you the notes, but it shows you all the accents and the slurs and the ties and the dynamic marks and the places you're supposed to speed up and slow down. And so as a blind musician, you are not once removed from the score. You are directly in contact with all the details of the score.
So man, I have so many things I want to talk about. So let's talk about will this work on any piece of music? Does it have to be in a specific format? I mean, how does that work, the conversion process?
It needs to be, standard Western music. But it can be any style of music. If you can write it in print music on the 5-line staff, we can convert it. Once we get it into our, we have a kind of a suite of software. Goodfeel is the Braille piece. We have a music notation editor called Lime, like lemon and lime. And that's a piece of software we basically acquired. It is now ours, but it started out life at the University of Illinois. A very smart guy there, Dr. Lippold Haken, and he and his sister had made it because they're amateur musicians, and they wanted to get their arrangements and stuff and their parts into print music. And when we started out, we thought, it'd probably take, people told us, it's going to take you years just to get a print music editor that's anywhere decent. So we thought, why reinvent that wheel? The piece that is missing is the Braille piece. So let's see if we can kind of retrofit somebody else's approach to music notation. And that's exactly what we did. We worked with Lippold, and we got it to where his line program was basically integrated with our Goodfeel program. But they are two separate applications even today. But because they're integrated, you can look at say the theme to the movie Titanic. You're looking at the print score on the screen. On my Braille display, I'm feeling the notes and all the related information like the dynamics and stuff. And then we can ask Lime to play it in tempo, and we can listen to it as the music is scrolling in sync, in print and in Braille. The sighted people get what they need. They see the print. I get what I need. I hear the music and I feel the Braille tracking on my Braille display. And then all of us can hear the pitches, hopefully. And then if you use a screen reader and you want to kind of drill down and say, what's happening here at measure 17, you can go there and move through note by note. You can hear the pitch sound. You can hear the screen reader software describe, let's say that pitch was the F above middle C. It would say F for half, for example. And that would tell me the pitch is F. It's in the fourth octave. It's a half note. Beautiful.
And I guess what I'm saying is, can you import any kind of document, or does it have to be a certain file type?
Okay. Yeah, the file types we can import into Lime. Technically, there are three, but really functionally there's only one. The most important one is called Music XML. And Music XML is, in my opinion, the best thing to happen to blind musicians since the invention of Braille music notation itself, because it's one of those things that came out of the mainstream, where you may have your music notation program of choice is, say, Finale, and mine is Sibelius, and you've just gone through a lot of trouble to get your masterpiece into Finale, but you want me to edit it and make some changes or do whatever, and I'm like, do I really need to sit down and key all this back into my Sibelius program? So a very smart guy named Michael Good worked with the team and figured out a way to basically go into Finale and say, okay, we're going to export this to Music XML. I run Sibelius, or in our case, Lime, and we import that information, and it kind of reconstitutes the score. So nobody had to rekey it in. Nobody had to scan it back in. It's basically 99.8% of the time. If it looked that way in Sibelius, it's going to look that way in Finale, and it's going to look that way in Lime, with the additional benefit that it not only looks good in print, but now we immediately have access to it through Braille music notation, through what we call a talking score feature for auditory learners, and lately another spin-off application called Lime Lighter that actually magnifies the music for people with low vision. They don't use Braille, they don't use speech. All they need is to see it a lot bigger. So we can make it really big, and we supply them with a wireless pedal board so that they can scroll using their foot, so they can keep your hands on your piano, your flute, or violin, whatever.
Wow, that's brilliant. So I to ask my next question, I have to tell you a little something about me. So when I was growing up, I didn't start playing an instrument until I was about 17, although I've been surrounded by music my whole life. Mm-hmm. But as a brain tumor survivor, most of my early life was focused on survival. So
it makes sense.
It makes sense. So there was no one to teach Braille music anywhere around me. And I didn't learn Braille itself until I was about 13, because, again, there was no one to teach for about 300 miles. Mm-hmm. There was no one to teach me the Braille. So, but one of the things, so I've never learned Braille music, but one of the things that always puzzled me was, how do I turn the page, read the Braille with both hands, and then play an instrument at the same time? Like, it just seems.
I understand. Yeah, that's a very important question. And
so, I mean, you've got a foot pedal that allows you to advance the score.
Yes, you can do that. It probably works better for people who can see the screen magnified. Mm-hmm. Conceivably, it could work for me, but basically, as a blind musician, I mean, I play a lot of jazz and pop stuff, and that I just use my ear and play it. But when I'm playing in a group, even like a swing band, I used to play in a community band here. We played, Duke Ellington and Glenn Miller and all those wonderful old things.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm playing second trumpet. I like to have the chart in Braille because it does show a lot of the dynamics and different articulations that they want, or when you're supposed to use a mute and this and that. Mm-hmm. So when I'm playing that, or if I'm playing in church with a group, or if I'm playing in a community orchestra or whatever, you want all that nuance. You want to know that. But because I play an instrument that involves me, well, it definitely involves my right hand playing the valves, but I've read music with my left hand while I'm playing, and at a slow tempo, I can sort of manage it in a pinch, but it's really bad for my technique. So if I have enough time, my preference is to memorize the music. Right. The point is, I'm memorizing the score. I am not memorizing the sound of somebody else playing it, who may or may not be paying attention to some of the nuance that the composer or the arranger wanted me to know. Like, hey, those notes are accented. Or right. You're supposed to make a crescendo here into this next phrase, or whatever it is. So that's where Braille notation, or notation in general, is really helpful.
But we still don't really have the ability to say, like some of our sighted colleagues, to sort of sight read at the gig. We don't, although sometimes we have a little more time. I'll just give you the headline now. But a few years ago,
I managed to compete for and win a grant to develop the technology to read Braille with my tongue. And
Whoa.
I actually have a video of a dear friend of mine, God rest his soul, he's gone, but he actually was sight reading a melody, sat down at a musical keyboard, and we had this thing in his mouth was like a lollipop, and you could feel vibrations on your tongue, and we fabricated Braille dots. And so that was the beginning of the realization of my dream to do just that. I would love to be able to sight read music. Now, that's not going to work for me as a trumpet player. You can't have a lollipop.
Exactly.
But it's not too good when you're trying to sing and you have one of those things in your mouth.
Yeah.
But, for playing a violin, for playing a keyboard, even percussion, like a snare drum, I mean, it's conceivable. Sadly, the reviewers at the National Science Foundation, we created our prototype, and they basically said in very polite academic language, Bill, this thing's way too expensive. It's too slow. And really, how many people is it really going to help? And I was like, guys, you have just missed that boat. It's gone. You should have been on it, but you're gone. So anyway, anybody listening who has a little money and an interest, let me know, because I know that this thing can be developed. I mean, it's like, I like to say that the first Model T car, did you know that the first Model T, or I don't know if it was Model T, maybe Model A Ford car, you refueled basically by standing up out of the driver's seat, flipping up the driver's seat, and dropping the fuel under the driver's seat into the gas tank. Well, after the first crash, something blew up, it's like, it's probably not a good idea to have the gas tank. So you learn as you go along,
the first one's always the most expensive one, right? It gets cheaper as you go along.
It gets cheaper as you go along, and, all of those things. But anyway, as I said, that might be a whole other conversation. But the point is, we memorize scores, because, as I said, when you have the Braille score, you are memorizing not just the notes and the rhythms. You're memorizing all the details of the score that make a difference when you're performing as a soloist or even as a member of an ensemble.
Absolutely.
It kind of reminds me of a guy I knew. He saw these two guys playing bagpipes, and they had T-shirts on, and the T-shirts say, "We play the bagpipes, so you don't have to." But it's pretty much, we memorize the score because we have to. I mean, if you want to be a successful blind musician, but and this, we blind people memorize pretty much everything. I'm sure if I asked you if you remember your phone number when you were like 8 years old, you would remember it. We remember everything.
Oh yeah. Still do.
So it's just kind of part of the deal.
Well, now when you started your journey as a musician, you had obviously somebody taught you Braille music at an early age.
Yeah.
Did you? So they taught you, the staff. They taught you the different notes for retardando and all these different things.
Right.
How often in your experience? Because my experience, as I say, was there's no one around for 300 miles to teach me. How often in your experience do people have access to that kind of, education from the get-go? And how can we, or how do we get your average university to have that kind of education for blind students? What does that horizon look like from your perspective?
Well, I'll start with the good news. The same technology that's bringing us together now. I'm in Pennsylvania, you're down in Georgia, I guess, still.
Right, right.
I teach people Braille music, and some of the guys that work for me, we teach Braille music to people all over the world. So that 300-mile thing is gone now. Now, it is ideal if somebody can sit down beside you and teach you Braille music. But there are plenty of us successfully teaching Braille music remotely, and we use a course that our company publishes called An Introduction to Music for the Blind Student. But there are other books too, but the bottom line is that's the good news. Now, the reasons why historically, Braille music has kind of been like the lonely stepchild of Braille codes. Really began back in the 50s and 60s when the trend to mainstream blind students into their local schools came along. And personally, I'm a fan of mainstreaming in general. Nothing's perfect in this world, but I think the benefits of being educated alongside sighted peers when it's working well is great for blind kids. But one of the unintended consequences of doing that was that the people who were trained to teach the blind typically were not musicians. They were not musical. And the music people in the public schools, or the private schools for that matter, just their training did not prepare them to deal with anything but like kids who were 2020.
Right.
And so, yeah, in the old days before that, back in the 50s and pre-60s, whatever, if you wanted an education, you were blind and you didn't have too many other complications in your life, you could go to the state school for the blind, and you probably lived there. And when you went to history class, you got a history book in Braille. You went to math class, you got your math book in Braille, and you went down to the music room, and here's your Braille music. Because all those teachers knew Braille, and your music teacher knew music and Braille. But
yeah.
Anyway, so what we've been able to do with our software, where it works best for the sighted people, is we get the Braille, I call them the Braille people together with the music people. And everybody does what they do best. Because I was describing before a lot of the benefits of our software to blind people like me, but the benefits to sighted people is that you could, as a sighted guy, you could enter a score into your notation program of choice, or just Lime, for that matter, if you don't have one. And you can see it on the screen, and it's in staff notation, which is what you know. And when you're happy with it, you just click a button that says, "Hey, Goodfield, turn this into Braille." So you don't have to be a Braille specialist. So what we do is we get the music people to prepare the information, the scores, the flue parts, whatever, and then they send them to the people who understand things like Braille embossers and literary Braille and how to work with blind students and all that. So the team gets together and we get the desired outcome. But getting back to your question, that's where that whole thing went off the rails, when people started going to mainstream schools. And in some cases, it was just, it was sometimes not even the case where the teachers knew enough literary Braille. Forget about like special codes like math and music Braille.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, because when I didn't have anyone that was around to teach me till I was like 12 years old Braille. So yeah. I'm low-sided adequate. Like I can read it, but I'm not super fast.
Right.
And I never learned Braille math or Braille music or any of that stuff because, again, there was nobody that taught that. I learned the basics finally. But, as you said, I mean, I've always just done what works best for me, which is memorization and ear. But what excites me, and let me ask you this question, is what excites me is this idea in my mind that you can tell the computer that you want to look at measure 75. Mm-hmm. And then you can tell the computer, presumably, if you're looking at a conductor score, you can say, I want to look at just the flutes, right? You can sort of, yeah. And then that's amazing. And my other question to go with that is it possible for someone to collaborate real time? In other words, can there be a sighted person working on the score with a blind musician reading along? And can you make edits like real time, or do you have to compile the score first?
No, you can make edits. You can go in and say, let's say you're in the key of G minor, and in music notation. Pardon me. In music notation, you would not want to write, say, a passage where you had G natural and then G flat. A hardcore music theorist would say, no, that needs to be F sharp. So you could go to the G flat and hit a certain key on your PC keyboard and flip it and make that G flat into an F sharp.
Nice.
Yeah. So you can do all those little things. You could go in and say, look, that needs to be, instead of a half note, what we want there is a quarter note and a quarter rest. You could do all that stuff. And I have written, I'm not going to call myself a composer with a capital C, but I've done enough writing little tunes and things and arranging other people's music. And I've used our software. And when I'm happy with what I do, if they're sighted people, I just click Control P and print it out and hand it to them and put them on their music stand. So if I'm making a flute part, say for a sighted person, I just fix it up in Lime, press Control P, or make a hard copy, put it on their music stand. If it's a blind flutist, I just launch Goodfeel from Lime and make the equivalent Braille score and emboss that on a Braille printer, or send it to them as a formatted file they can open on a little Braille note taker device, and they can see it on there. So, yeah, it is possible to collaborate. And in fact, we have some students who use our software. In the conservatory that I went to, and lots of schools to this day, you have a class that's called musicianship or music theory. And at some point, do you remember that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So at some point, the teacher says something like, okay, look, guys, I'm going to play you something in the key of F major. I'm going to start on C above middle C. And it's going to be in 3/4 time. And I want you to write it down. That's called dictation.
Yep.
And we have people who got so good with our software, they actually take dictation in real time in class and notate what they hear. And then the cool thing is that the teacher can come down and look at their laptop screen and say, yeah, you got it. Or, you know what, measure 7 there, that should be a F sharp, or that should be actually a dot a quarter, not a quarter note, or whatever. So, yeah, it's great. I mean, after my first teacher, who taught me the basics of Braille music in a few months, and then she got married and moved away, from that day to this, I have never had a teacher, I've never had a blind teacher teach me music anyway, but I've never had a sighted teacher who knew anything about Braille.
Yeah.
So a lot of people were understandably anxious, like, well, I don't know if I can teach this student. I don't know. I've never taught a blind person. I don't know anything about Braille. And I'd say, well, I don't know anything about print. But, we both know something about music. So let's see if we can connect through that. And most of the time it worked. But what I love about what we've been able to do with our software is we've broken down those barriers between, hey, I don't know about that print stuff. I don't know about the Braille stuff. What are we going to do? Now we have a multimedia experience where you just use the medium or the media that work best for you. So in my case, I'm looking at the Braille on my Braille display. I'm hearing it spoken by the screen reader. Maybe in my teacher's case, they see the music on the screen on the 5-line staff that they're used to. And now we don't have to even worry about it. Now we're just right down to talking about musical concepts, about that ought to be actually F major, or that ought to be a diminished chord, or that's the wrong rhythm, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got so many of these pieces. You've got the auditory piece, you've got the sighted piece, you've got the Braille piece, and then you've also got the introduction book. And is your book in Braille, audio? What's screen reader format?
We published the book in print, hard copy, and Braille hard copy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now what, without drilling into like way down in the dirt, if a blind person wanted to get into this universe that you've created here, where there's a lot of possibilities, and I'm so impressed with them. If I read Braille music, I would be jumping up and down right now. But it's never too late to learn, of course. It's just a question of time. But what does it cost, without being uber specific? What does it cost to get into this to these programs and have the Braille display and all that kind of good stuff? And to add to that, is your software available on Mac and PC or just PC or what?
Okay. Well, there is a a price range, probably, well, there are two ways to get the software. You can get what we call a perpetual license. You buy it once, it's yours forever.
Right.
We also have some subscription models that you get in for an annual subscription or even a monthly subscription at a startup price, and then you renew for a little less. And most people end up using the perpetual thing.
Yeah.
And so the price range for the perpetual license for the talking score feature, and you don't need Braille, that starts out around $750, getting up to the suite of software with Braille, interactive Braille and print, the talking score, and a music scanning application that we haven't talked about. But all those licenses, that's just under $1,600. A lot of
Not
times, yeah, well, it depends. It's interesting because some people would say that's ridiculous, and some people say, well, that's not bad, and some people say, okay, fine, whatever. But it's the price we found that actually keeps us in business, so that we don't have to go down the street and work for someone else, and you don't have dancing dots.
Absolutely.
But because as you can imagine, it's a niche product. But I should say that most of the sales are to schools and government agencies, so they're what you might call third-party funded. The beneficiary, in many cases, the blind student or sometimes professional, who actually gets the scores is typically not the person who is paying for the software.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's important to note. A lot of times people talk about free software and it's free to you, but it's not free to make. Somebody's paying. Right. Somebody's paying somebody.
Well, that's right. Somebody is paying and the thing is, research and development, all that stuff costs money, man. I mean, that's,
I can tell you it sure does. And, and because you're a business guy, right? You're the last guy to get paid. You got to pay everybody else first.
Absolutely.
Then, hey, there's a little left over. Let's go out to dinner or something.
Hooray! Yeah, exactly.
Or let's break
even is always a good day.
Breaking even is a good thing. Yes.
Yeah. but I mean, like, so with the how expensive are things like the Braille scanners and the printers?
Those things can be pricey as well. But the good news is that if you already had that, a lot of schools already have what we call a Braille embosser or a Braille printer. Mm-hmm. So you can use that same hardware to crank out our music stuff. You don't need a special one. You can use an off-the-shelf musical keyboard with our software because you can input notes by typing them in, but you can also play them in, which is much more intuitive, plays
for sure.
C7 chord. I know how to do that. Okay. So a lot of the stuff is already in place if you're serving visually impaired or if you yourself are visually impaired. But yeah, all this stuff adds up. I mean,
sure.
There was a saying a while ago, and I understand the philosophy behind it, that says, well, with enough training and education, we can reduce blindness to a mere inconvenience. And I had a customer who once remarked, a really expensive inconvenience.
Well, the fact is, there are accessibility barriers come in many different shapes and sizes. Mm-hmm. And one of those barriers is financial. Yes. We do have, I believe, everything we need in the 21st century to give, fairly unfettered access to the blind, but it comes with a price tag. And sometimes that price tag's not bearable, even though there are people like yourself who are not getting rich doing this stuff. You're doing it because it's your calling, it's your passion, it's what you do. And so, you've got this, you have this financial barrier, and this is a problem when it comes to wanting to have an equal. All the things that I want to fight for in life are essentially, I want a fair shot. If I'm not up to the task, or if I fail, or if it's something on me, that's fine. But make sure that I at least have the same opportunity to try and be successful. So that's the kind of things that Dancing Dots is doing, is laying that, leveling that playing field, so we can have that.
Yeah, you're talking my language, because what we want to do is get blind people, even if you're a little fourth grader,
Yeah.
get you to a point where if you want to do this now, you can do it. If you want to blow it off like your buddies and not practice and and do whatever
That's on
else,
you. Right.
that's on you. But at least you're at a point where you have a choice. And now a lot of people who make the choice, the beautiful thing I've observed, and this is true in my own life, is that when you get the choice and you exercise your option to practice and work hard, suddenly you are leading the section.
Yeah.
Suddenly you are playing the solos. And, and here's the beautiful transition that I've seen in my own life, and I see it with other kids. We literally, as blind people, do spend a fair amount of time literally following sighted people around, right?
Right.
And we're used to the idea of being the follower. But when you get to a point with having the information, literally knowing the score, suddenly you are now in the role of leadership.
Yeah.
You are now leading people, and you are actually able to help somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay, so another conversation, many conversations could be about this whole issue of help and when to ask for it, when you don't want it, when you need it, and you should know you need it, but you don't need it, all that stuff. But when you get to a point where you can help somebody as a blind person, it is a liberating experience because you're like, hey, wait a minute. I don't always have to be the follower. And actually, I could help somebody else. And it doesn't have to be one way all the time. Yeah,
there's a great joy in feeling like you are really fully contributing to your universe. There's a great joy in that. And
there is.
When I was in college, there was no Braille music. I mean, I didn't have any of that stuff. My school didn't have and would not have paid for adaptive technology at all, especially just not for one student. And while I can disagree with that on many levels, I it is what it is. So, but I was made. Now, keep in mind, I had no way of reading the score. But I was made rhythm section leader, because I had such a good grasp of what was going on mentally and through the auditory senses, and I could hold all that in my head. Exactly. And because I played guitar and bass, I knew enough that I could talk to the piano player like, hey, you know what? Bass player is in this range. You need to change inversions here, or hey, maybe don't go down to that octave. Keep it. And I would play guitar or bass, whatever we didn't have. And so with the guitar players, just leave the roots out of your chords a lot of times, just because I'm down here, piano player's down here. We don't need that. So we were able to, and I was able to talk about groove and feel and pocket and all these things. And so that was a real. At the time, I didn't really think anything about it because it's just what I did. I was like, oh yeah, I could lead this, but looking back, it's to your point. I mean, it's really powerful when you can be of service. It makes you feel good. It helps other people. I mean, that's good stuff. I mean, and one of the guitar players who, when I was going to school for music, we had an older student, which I love the fact that in today's world, people in their 50s are going back to college, and it's we have that kind of access. But back then, it was very back in the 90s. It was really it wasn't as normal. It was kind of rare. So we had a guy that's like 45 years old playing guitar when I was rhythm section leader, and he had never played in 3/4 before, and he was a great rock guitar player, but wanted to broaden his horizons. So again, I was able to help him, find some of those jazz things and some of those things that were, common fare for me, but he had just never really done. So anyway, to your point, that's awesome. Tell me, I don't want to talk about me, I want to talk about you. Tell me about this scanning software that sounds terribly exciting as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that came out of the mainstream. We distribute a scanning program. It's not something we develop. The particular one we distribute is called Sharp Eye Music Reader, SHARPEYE. And it's actually not even a mainstream product anymore, but we liked it so much that when the original author sold out to another company, we got a special deal to continue to distribute it, and it's excellent. It's excellent software. It is not perfect. And so when you scan music, it will many times say 0 rhythm warnings. That's wonderful, because when it's 0 rhythm warnings, that means we got this. We can export it. We can export it to XML. We can pull it into Lime. We can make it big for low vision people. We can turn it into Braille. We can listen to the screen reader, tell you all about it. But if it says even 1 rhythm error, as a blind user, I have a problem, because 2 things need to happen that are probably not going to happen. One is I need to be able to look at the original score and say, oh, actually, SharpEye thought those were half notes, but they're quarter notes. Okay, even if I knew that, then I have to take a very graphical interface and drag things around and click and drag and change that half note into a quarter note. So we try to manage people's expectations as blind people as what you can do independently with any kind of music OCR software, not just SharpEye, but anything, because it's the same issue. If it makes errors, and it will sooner or later, then you have to have some kind of strategy to actually fix those, because the last thing, you know this better than most people, you do not want to memorize something wrong.
Oh, God, no.
Learn it wrong, because then you have to unlearn it, and it's just anyway, Well,
habits are easy to form and hard to break. So
that's right, and because we have good memories and strong memories, you learn it the first time. It's very hard to unlearn it and unforget it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but the scanning thing is cool when it works, or when you have somebody who can help you make it work, because again, you don't have to sit down and key in every last little detail into the music editor before you can actually learn it.
So when you this is where you can collaborate with a sighted colleague.
Yeah.
When you scan the music document in, it becomes, is it an XML document, or is it a specific, how does that work? Because what I'm wondering is, how can you pass along what you scanned in to a sighted counterpart who can look at the original score and go, oh, here's what the problem is?
Well, yeah. Well, when you scan with SharpEye, of course, it's all its own internal format. But when you're done and you're happy and everything's cleaned up, you can export it to XML. But while you're working in SharpEye, what happens is you scan the page, and it appears as an image on the bottom of your screen. And then you go into a step that SharpEye calls read, and you basically read that image, and it reconstitutes it as music. That image at that point could be a picture of your house or your dog or whatever. But it happens to be a picture of this page with groups of 5 horizontal lines. Some of them have these like balloon-shaped things with different things pointing out of them, and that there are notes.
Sure.
And it understands what all that means. But when it reconstitutes the score, there are times when it puts these little blue triangles that literally point to a problem and say, we don't know what that is. And so a sighted user would look at the bottom, and there's a way to kind of line them up so you can A/B and look at the bottom, look at the top, compare them, and say, oh, I see the problem.
Oh, nice.
It
Okay.
missed the bar line, or it missed the time signature, or whatever it is. And then you have tools you can fix that up. And but again, you want to fix them. I've been in situations where teachers have just been like, well, it's close enough, and they export it, and then goes into Lime, and then it's wrong in Lime, and then it's wrong in Braille, and it flows downhill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so we've talked a little bit about the early formation of Dancing Dots, and a little bit about your journey. We've talked about the currently. What are you thinking about, without giving me any trade secrets, what are you thinking about for the future? Is there anything you're looking to do that you're not doing? What's coming up for you and for Dancing Dots?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I should say, before we get into looking ahead too far, that we were talking earlier about Sonar and Cake Talking. These days, we are doing a lot of consultation and training on mainstream software that people have adapted. One's called Reaper, that I'm sure have heard of.
Oh yeah, very familiar, for sure.
And Reaper, it's a very low price point to get into.
Oh, very expensive.
And the adaptive part is free. But since it's free, one of the downsides of free stuff is that you can't call 1-800 hell help me with this thing, So
exactly.
we provide consultation and training for that to help people make records with their computer, basically.
Oh, fantastic. So are you using Reaper as your main DAW that you train people on?
Yes, although I'm not doing the training, I am the lightweight Reaper user. I know enough to show you some basics, but I have other smarter, more seasoned users of Reaper that
and are you
teach
using
people.
JAWS or NVDA or what's
depends on what I personally use JAWS, but some people prefer NVDA screen reader. That's fine. We've been also teaching people and consulting on the Mac side with Logic Pro and Pro Tools, which has come a long way in the last few years.
Time.
Yeah,
big time.
So it's a different world now for the audio stuff. But looking ahead, I mean, there are a lot of pie in the sky things, right? But the one that fascinates me, okay, I've talked a little bit about the dream of sight reading.
Right.
The other one is even maybe a little more scientific kind of based. Not freedom scientific, science fiction based. And that would be the brain to MIDI connection. Where you can sit in your chair and you're musical, you know how this works. In your brain, you're hearing a melody and a bass line and some chords, and you're hearing different instruments play them. And you could think that at something, and that something could convert it, could realize it into actual notation, actual sounds that you could play back. Because, I got into this thing like a lot of people do because of my own situation. I'm blind. Okay. What kind of coping strategies can we find for that?
Yeah.
So through my work, I met people who have other challenges. Sometimes it's a physical challenge. Maybe you have cerebral palsy. You're very musical, but it's very hard for you to make your hands play a keyboard.
Right.
But in your head, you're hearing so much
it's
stuff.
all there. Yeah.
Everybody knows about Beethoven. He had it all in his head. But there's a famous story where he was so deaf, he was conducting the orchestra, but he got out of sync with them, and he thought he had, I don't know, somehow they finished playing the piece before he thought they were finished. And then he turned around. The audience was on their feet. He was like, wait a minute, I'm not even done yet, So, but it's all in his head. And in fact, that's where the music really is. The thing we call the music is our ability to realize what we're hearing fused with what we're feeling, and we put it out and we vibrate the air and we create sounds. And sometimes people like the sounds, sometimes they don't, but we're expressing something. But It's all starting internally, right? So if we could get that internal information externalized without, basically, let's say, hands-free.
Right.
That would be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
And I have some ideas on how to do it, which I won't talk about, first of all, because they're half-baked at this point. But I think we're approaching a time where existing technology could allow us to get there or get closer to there.
Yeah. Oh, what a gift that would be for people that have, motor issues.
Yeah.
And are musical, because there's nothing sadder than untapped potential. There's nothing more just heartbreaking than having this ability, but through some barrier you're not able to achieve it. And that's the thing that's like, my only real prayer is twofold. Lord, let me make progress. I don't mind a hard, long journey. Just let me make progress, and also keep my hands and ears working.
Right. Just one more thing. One more thing, Lord. Yeah, I would like to keep hearing, please.
Yeah. That's about it, man. Because I've had, I ended up in a wheelchair for a while, and I had to have a whole total hip replacement, total shoulder replacement, all this stuff. But the point is that, It's a pretty simple thing. So you are so right that music is an inherent part, in my mind anyway. Music is an inherent part of humanity, of being alive. And you may express that professionally, or you may not. But the truth of the matter is that everyone deserves the opportunity to create and enjoy music. So, that's why I'm so grateful for you for doing all these things to make that possible. And I think the sooner we can get people learning Braille music, the better it is. And that's something that I'd love to continue educating people on, is how far Braille music has come. They're not just these giant scores in a metal box anymore.
No,
no,
no, it's gotten a lot more rich. I mean, we love Braille music. Braille music, it's still, in my mind, is the most elegant, economic way to express a score. And Louis Braille was a genius to be able to create something like that. He understood intuitively how the sense of touch is different than the sense of sight, and how we can get information. All that is so cool. But we wanted to enrich that information and augment it with the tools of the new millennium, which are, synthetic speech through screen readers, which MIDI technology, which allows your computer to play notes back to you and record them, and also things like paperless Braille displays, and even screen magnification algorithm for music notation, not just for text. So yeah, and I will say this, it's wonderful to advocate for Braille music, and I'm certainly will say I'm right there in the front row.
Yeah,
but some people can't feel Braille. They have diabetes. They can't feel it.
Right.
Some people are just auditory learners. They never learned literary Braille for whatever reason. Some people they have low vision. And then we've talked about some people with other challenges where, I hear all this music in my head, but I can't make it come out because I can't keep my hand still long enough to play. Right. And I can't express it to someone else. I don't know how to write it down,
Right.
So, but I have also, talked to music teachers, well-meaning people, who have said things like, well, she has perfect pitch and she has a great memory. And so we just play it once and she's got it. And I used to go around and around trying to say this, but I finally got it down to one question. Perfect pitch is a great gift, but have you ever met any sighted people with perfect pitch? Oh yeah, I had a student one time years ago, or I had a teacher. And then the second question was, well, when you found out that your student had perfect pitch who could see, did you go over and take the score off their music stand?
Brilliant.
No. Well, then don't do that to the blind student. If she has perfect pitch, that's great. She has a great memory. That's a gift. But give her another gift. Let her have the score. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And especially, in the realms that I am popular in, improvisation is highly praised.
Yes.
Well, that's easy for me then, because I can be the creator and the leader, and people follow me, not the other way around. But if I want to be in, there are some other mediums like classical where that's not, improvisation is not typically part of the main toolbox.
No.
And so if you want to play in a symphony or orchestra or whatever like that, boy, knowing the score is absolutely mandatory. I mean, it just really is something you need to have. And so I'm waiting for John Williams to call me up and say, Joey, we got to have you play guitar on this piece, and whatever it takes to get you the score, we'll do that. Until that happens, I have to sort of steer clear of classical, because it's not a good return on my time.
No,
if I have to spend,
right.
I mean, if I have to spend 60 hours memorizing the score, and I get paid $300 to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are certain gigs that you don't want.
You just can't do it. I'd love to do it, but it's just not practical.
If it costs you more to do it, then yeah.
Exactly.
Now we're in a business conversation, but But getting back to like most of our users, I should say, or beneficiaries, are in the educational side of things. Yeah. And despite the misconception that all us blind people have rhythm and we're all little Stevie Wonders.
Yeah.
The reality is that most of us, blind or sighted, will not go into the professional music business, right?
That's right.
But the benefits of studying music are real. And they're transferable skills, like cultivating a good memory, working with people, right?
Yeah.
Being part of a group, working towards something, getting a little bit better every day, and trying to get, yesterday I couldn't play that note, now I can. All of that good stuff. And there are study after study that show that students who study music do better on standardized tests. They have fewer behavioral problems. They actually have better concepts of spatial relationships. I mean, this is documented research. I'm not making it up. And so blind students, like sighted people, get all that. But there's one other benefit that I have observed in my own life and the students that I work with. Music brings people together. And one of the barriers of being the blind kid is that it's really hard sometimes to kind of like relate to the sighted kids. And they're not sure how to approach you. And sometimes you literally don't know where they are. So it's like hard to kind of start a conversation. But as soon as you're in a group, like a band or an orchestra or a chorus, and you're making music with people, all those conversations and social kind of situations just arise naturally. And pretty soon you are talking to people about things you both love. And suddenly you are no longer the blind kid. I mean, you're still blind, but you're not, that blind kid that we see walking around with his cane and banging into me. He's now, he's cool. He really likes, he likes jazz, or he likes baseball, or he likes pizza, or whatever it is. And suddenly we are finding a way to relate to one another.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, that happened to me as a teenager. It was hard to go. I mean, I had the precociousness enough to talk to anybody. I never met a stranger, but when you don't know where they are, it's hard to go up and say hello.
It really is.
So, but once you put the guitar in your hand and you start playing a little bit, people come over and go, "Oh, hey, that was cool. Hey, do you know this song?" Or whatever. It really helps break those barriers. And I think I think social interaction in anything, whether it's sports or music or anything like that, really does mean a lot to a child. And also, I think from a mental health standpoint, music is so critical. In the fact of being able to let you release stress, giving you something to. I mean, I use it. This is a long conversation, but I won't go into. But I've used it as pain management before.
I can imagine that would work.
It's not that you're not hurting still, but you're on top of the pain instead of under the pain. So which is a long conversation. I could talk to you, my friend, for hours. Let me just close with this. Are there anything that for people listening to this who are like, oh my God, I have to have this for myself, or I have to have this for a colleague, or I have to have this for my child? Are there any ways that people can, what are the best ways for people to look at grants or other government funding to help blind practitioners of music? Well,
if you're school age, then, and you have a disability that you've disclosed, then the law is, I believe, that you have to have what's called an individual education plan. And so this conversation about, my child's musical, we'd like to get him involved in the school band or whatever. If it's a school program and they're putting print music in front of sighted kids, then ideally they're going to be able to find a way to get you a way to read the music and to have the music materials you need. So you can start with your school. Now, if you're going to a private school, or if you're college bound, I should say, you're college bound, well, every state in the union has an agency called a rehabilitation agency or some name like that. And their mission is to get blind people ultimately working, or at least in a better place. And so to get them the training they need, whether that's going to college or some kind of vocational program, and the equipment that they may need, and the software, let's say, in some cases, or hardware. So those guys can help. We also have had situations where community groups will get together, somebody's church or somebody's local Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, what have you. People will approach them and express a need. You know, my child is very musical and blind. They need some special software. They want to make sound recordings. They want to make records like you do. And, sometimes those clubs will come together, or a church or some kind of community group will come together and make it happen. So there are ways to do it. And there are getting to be, like I mentioned, Reaper. To get in, at least as far as the software, is a pretty low bar. Now, you do need some hardware. You're going to need a musical keyboard. You're going to need some kind of sound card or audio interface. But all the stuff is off-the-shelf stuff. It's not necessarily just made for us, making it more expensive. It's it's mainstream stuff. So you can get in and you start making music and make it in your bedroom or your family room and put it online and share it with your friends. You might even sell it to people. Who knows?
Heck yeah, that's right. Yeah. That is fantastic. And the website is dancingdots.com, right? Dancing Dots,
DOTS, plural, dancingdots.com. There's a contact form there. If you fill it out, I will get a copy of that. If you want to try the software, you can download it and try it for a couple of weeks. We'll even, if we can, find some time to connect with you, walk you through some sample scores, and just kind of see how it works, and try it before you buy it, kind of thing.
And you offer training not only in the DAWs, which you don't directly sell, but you offer training in all your software as well, right?
Yes, sure. We do. We supply a certain amount of it to new customers just as part of the purchase price, and then sometimes people do contract with us to get specific skills or get up and running faster. We do teach people Braille music through our Introduction to Music for the Blind student course. There's also a page on our site. You can read more about that. And I would just encourage you to try to find what you need. One thing people ask me, and they're good questions, what kind of technology does my child need? But let's step out and zoom out even further. If your child's blind, or even if your child's not blind, but especially if your child's blind, and they're very young, bring them to hear human beings playing music. Bring them to hear somebody in your local church, your local community orchestra, singing, playing. There are lots of schools in many areas. I'm blessed to be in a place where there are tons of schools here, and they all give free programs. You can hear their orchestras and choruses, and it's free or next to free to go hear them. Bring your kids to hear it. I never heard live music professional music until I was 14. I had records. And then a friend of mine called me one day and he says, my mom's making me to go hear this thing called Messiah. Do you want to go with? I was like, well, I'm not doing anything. I'll go with you. It was like 5 blocks from our house. We walked over there. We sat down. They started playing Handel's Messiah. They had a string orchestra. They had a chorus and a couple good soloists. And I was like that old George Gershwin song. How long has this been going on? I mean, I was like, nobody told me about this.
Yeah.
So I would say get your kids out, whether they're blind or sighted, but especially if they're blind, to really hear music being made, not canned music. Music's wonderful, and with things like YouTube and oh my gosh, CDs and Apple Music and Spotify. It's just incredible. It's wonderful. But nothing will ever beat walking into a room and hearing people play and sing together.
Yeah. And I'm a studio wizard. That's where I live, my little studio cave. But that being said, microphones are a poor substitute for your ears.
No, that's absolutely right.
Hearing a real group, even if they don't play perfectly, just being able to share that moment, all being in the same moment, the same space, is powerful. It's really amazing.
Amen. Yeah, you look at it's like sort of like auditorily being able to watch somebody walking on a tightrope sometimes.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It's like, is she going to hit that note?
Yeah.
Bam!
Exactly. You're pulling for them, absolutely. And again, it's this thing like you're all in that moment together. There's no, there's some kind of energy exchange that happens between the performer and the audience, and it's a feedback loop. And it's a mysterious thing, and it's so real. Well, and I tell the guys in my bands, like, listen, as much as I want to be perfect, I know that I never will be. But pursuing musical perfection is certainly laudable, as long as you recognize the value of the humanity and the inherent flaws that are going to happen. But the thing is, you can turn all that stuff to your advantage. And I always tell the guys in my bands, like, look, as long as we're having fun, everybody else is going to have fun, whether we play perfectly or not. You don't want a train wreck where people fall off stop playing and stuff like that. But as long as, which we don't have those kind, or I wouldn't ask you to play. But it's like, even if we're not perfect, as long as we're having fun, we will transmit that joy and that enthusiasm to the audience. So we just have to make sure we have the right mental attitude, and then everything else will fall into place. But Bill, let me tell you, my friend, you are a scholar and a gentleman, and it's always a privilege to spend some time in your company. And I thank you for sharing your time with me today. And Dancing Dots, I cannot credit you more than to say that, if it hadn't been for Bill McCann, I wouldn't still be in the music business, because you making Sonar accessible. I mean, I eventually had to move away from tape because it just, and I'm glad that I did, don't get me wrong, but there were, as you know, there were a number of challenges as a blind person moving into that computer world. And we still have but the point is that if you hadn't done what you did, I don't know where I'd be, because I had to move into computer because that's what everybody wanted. Nobody wanted to pay for tape costs anymore. And then with the internet making it possible to collaborate all across the world with other people, and you had to, and then you have this wonderful thing called non-destructive editing. Like, I didn't mean to do that. Control Z.
Let me just undo.
Yeah. Whoops. Yeah. On tape, if you did that, that was it.
That was over. Yeah. We'll work. We'll find a way to work with it. Well, I want to thank you for your kind words, and what we've done, what I've been able to do by the grace of God, and a lot of people who love me, and I'm sure you could say the same thing. But I will confess to this. My association with Sonar and making it accessible is reflected glory. That glory belongs to a wonderful creator named David Pinto. And David really made those scripts. And he's a very humble guy, and he didn't make a big deal about, actually, that's my name. It should be. Yeah. So we made a deal with him to sell and support it. And we had a lot of consulting with him to say, this is what we'd like. But in the end, David was the one who came up with that and made that happen. And there are so many people like you who have said that to me. And as often as I talk to David these days, I try to say that to him some way or another. And David, if you're listening, I hope I should say it more often, because he really was the guy. We made the way in for notation, but David really was the pioneer in the audio production side of things. And he's still a great educator. He has an organization out in California called the Academy of Music for the Blind. And he's teaching, especially shines with teaching people with special needs. But kids who are just blind like us. But anyway, thanks for saying that, Joey. It means a lot to me. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I want to, people talk a lot now about inclusion, and I think inclusion is a really important thing, but I've been talking about it for 30 years. It's like, include me.
Well, I'll end on this note. I've been part of many diversity, equity, inclusion committees, whether it's with AES or Grammys or whoever,
right?
And the Georgia Chamber of Commerce and all this stuff. And at long last, without me having to say it, which is highly unusual, a few people have started saying maybe we should make the word accessibility part of that idea. And that's, boy, what a great feel, because I've been saying that for 25 years.
Yes.
So, but all of a sudden, things seem to be tipping in the right direction. I guess you just have to run up the hill, for a long time until you finally get to the top. But it's nice. It's nice to hear that. It's nice to hear that word accessibility being put. And a friend of mine, Peter, actually said, we really shouldn't have to call it accessibility. We really should call it usability, because without everybody having access to it, it's just not fully usable. And I think that's a great point. But anyway,
that's right.
But listen, my friend, blessings to you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for dancing, Doc.
My pleasure, brother. And you keep up your good work. I know you don't want to talk so much about yourself, but I've had the pleasure of hearing you perform, hearing you speak, and you just keep it up.
Oh, I'm too dumb to quit.
I like that.
Listen, I'm going to stay in better touch, and we'll chat again sometime soon. And I'm going to, if I ever find time, I will call you and maybe even learn some Braille music from you.
Why not? In your spare time, why not?
In my spare time. Yeah.
Let's go.
I appreciate you, brother.
All right, Joey. You
Thanks,
take good
Bill.
care. All right.
All right, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.